Hello and welcome to Knowledge by Nature. In today's video, we're going to be talking a little bit about how do you plan for your next year. And so for me, I'm going to show you kind of what I do, how I kind of start piecing everything together to get ready for the next year. Now, this isn't like a planner setup or anything like this. This is me brainstorming about what am I going to do next year? And a few things that I have found really nice for that is one, I am using my notes from a School Nest, which I bought, and I've put like my fourth grade notes in this, things like throughout the year that I think about that I might want to use for the next year, things that I might want to change for the next year. And so this is kind of my brain dump of things throughout the whole time. And so I will go ahead and I will start adding our fifth grade things in here. And then I will also continue to use this and brain dump throughout the whole fifth grade year, which helps me go on to the next year. Now, before we get completely started, if this is your first time here, welcome. I am a homeschool mom to a soon-to-be fifth grader. We love all things books, homeschool, and sharing our journey with you. And if that is something that you are interested in, I would love if you consider hitting that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. If you are returning, welcome back. It's always lovely to have you. All right, so one of the very first things that I do is I reference this book. Now, there are all sorts of different methods that you can use. There is Charlotte Mason, there is classical, there is Waldorf, there is unschooling. I mean, there is so many types of things that you can use to educate your child. I would say that we lean more towards a classical education style with a little bit of Charlotte Mason-ish things thrown in there. But I would say a good chunk of what I feel like our education kind of bases off of is the classical education. And I think this book is a great resource for that particular type of education. For one, it lists different curriculums. This is the 4th edition. They've come out with a new one, and I think that all of their curriculum recommendations are maybe now on a website or something. But this is fantastic. It has from kindergarten, maybe even pre-K, honestly. Let's take a look. Yes, it's kindergarten through 4th grade, which is what they call the grammar stage. And then it goes through the logic stage, which is your 5th grade through 8th grade. And it has the rhetoric stage, which is your 9th grade through 12th grade. And I just feel like this is such a wealth of information. It has little schedules, things like that to kind of get you going. Like, no, I don't follow it to a T. No, I don't think this is the end all be all, but I do find it to be a great resource and really help me to know like where to start. Where should I kind of be honing in on for that year? So that is one of my first steps, is to reread this. And I actually go through this multiple times throughout the year, just kind of refreshing myself. But for sure, before we begin a new year, I'm going back to the 4th grade year, and I'm kind of reviewing that. Like, did we hit kind of the things that they were talking about? And then I begin looking at 5th grade, and then I briefly look at the year ahead of me. And that just kind of gives me a good idea of what am I looking at? What should we already have done that maybe I kind of let fall through the cracks? Things like that. And I make notes in my notes about those things. So I find a section here and I just label it 5th grade. And this is things that I start to pull out. As I'm reading through this, I'm making notes about maybe what do I want to do for science? What was really good for science? What is my goal? What are the things that I want to hit? And so that's what I have went through. I've looked at my science and possibly what is a good topic for us to cover in our 5th grade year. I go over what other things that we might need to be covering as far as, are we going to do Latin? Because if we are, this is the year. So you might want to look at Latin. Is there a pro or con to your child doing Latin? For instance, if your child shows any interest in going into a medical field, Latin is a very good thing to learn, because so many of the terminology that is used in a medical field, where it be veterinarian science or human anatomy terminology, it has this background of Latin, and therefore it is going to make that process easier because they're going to know what Latin is. Additionally, it says that if you learn Latin, that other languages come easier, as far as like Spanish, things like that, because they kind of have that same root, and it makes things easier. So just for example, it talks about starting in Latin over here in this book. Those are all things that I have noted down in here, as well as things about history and geography, different notes that they have. So for instance, like the different procedures of what I might want to do when I am working with history. As far as like my homeschool lesson planner, this is another thing to have with me when I'm kind of planning. And one, I can go back and I can look at kind of our 4th grade goals. Did we reach those things that I had set out to do for the 4th grade year? Is there kind of something that maybe I want to make sure that I add on to this year? Is also another great time to kind of look at that schedule, see how we did, look at some book list. Was there things that didn't get read that I would really like to have on our list for next year? And so those are other things where I'm kind of referencing the previous year to make this next year's plan. Another thing that I also check into is ambleside.com, and that is completely free curriculum, and they have tons of book lists and things like that. I kind of look at that and see like what do they recommend doing daily and weekly. How do they split up their terms? Is that something I could possibly want to do? What literature are they recommending for this year? Poetry, what are they recommending? So things that I might want to add in that's maybe not necessarily broken out into this in quite the way that I would maybe want, then I can come to another resource. And that's where I say I'm pulling in a little bit of Charlotte Mason sometimes, and mainly probably sticking closer to the classical side. But we do definitely do things that I would consider are Charlotte Mason things. And I continue to write all of those things down as far as how we would do different things on each term if I decided to do those. And also landforms. What landforms are they talking about? And then I put in this big book list. Now, any book lists that I have, I try to put a little asterisk by it so that I know that I have that book. So if I think of it as I'm writing it down, I go ahead and do it. And then I also reference our own library to see if there's anything in our library that I feel is kind of going with this theme to add with it. Now, after I do that, I continue to add more books, and so there are far more book recommendations than we will ever have time for, but that leaves me lots of options. And then I start looking at our scheduling. But before we jump over to our scheduling, another option that you might want to look at is going to your state standards. Now, usually I would think each state is going to have their different state standards, and you can look those up. And that is something that I always do. I look up the standards to see exactly what my state is going to be requiring. Do I always follow that to a T? No, probably not. There are things that we have covered well in advance of when they recommended it, and I'm sure there are things that we will cover later that they might be recommending that I do in a certain year. But I have it and I would say eventually all the things are going to be, but I go through there and I see the big hot topics of items that they feel, the state feels is very important, because likely there is some importance to that. And so I want to make sure that we are covering the things that are very important for certain standards and things like that. Another thing that is really, really helpful is if you were able to get your hands on a curriculum guide. This one is actually from Rainbow Resources, and it is just so nice when you are looking for a new curriculum. Yes, you can get on the computer and you can look and all that kind of stuff, but it's really, really nice to just be able to open this up and do some comparisons. So whatever you might be looking for, whether it be history or science, they have all of these awesome things so that you can just look right off the bat and know what they're covering. Is it available for like an online thing? Is it religious? Is it secular? It has all of these different options in here that let you know right away. And there's also things that I think that I might not otherwise have even known about if I didn't have this. Yes, I can type in a handwriting curriculum, but is it gonna really show me all the things that it has? Additionally, they have all of these things right here that's like traditional print, modern print, cursive italic, and Spencerian. So, and they also have all of these things right here that shows you what grade each of these are available for, what the price range is, the style as far as traditional, modern, cursive, italic, things like that. I really like having this just right here in my hands. And I find this really nice for doing a quick comparison. And then I can go to the internet. I can do deeper dives. I can look for videos. I can look at flip throughs and be like, oh, well, this one right here, Friendly Science, looks really, really good. Let's see if there's any videos on that. Let's look at it deeper. So if you're able to get one of these guides, it's wonderful to have along as you are planning for the year. Now, the next thing that I do is scheduling. And one of the things that I do every year is I go to papertraildesign.com and I print myself off some calendars. These are Sunday starts. They also have Monday starts, which I found was very confusing for my mind because I just kept wanting to circle things that was actually the weekend. So I went back and I printed myself a Sunday to Saturday calendar, and I find that that is much easier for my brain to process. But there are all sorts of different ones. You can get plain ones. There's a really pretty full page color watercolor one. I love it. So this is great that I can just go ahead and start figuring out what days we may be wanting to take off and get an idea of what our schedule goes for. Now, generally, we have always schooled year around. I am playing with the idea of changing that up a little bit, and this is how I'm able to do that. I'm able to kind of look and see, is that a real possibility for us, or should I not? Moving on to scheduling. Now, as I mentioned, they have recommended schedules and recommended like how long you might want to spend on a subject. When you first get started, you may not have any idea how long you really need to be doing something. And so something I found really valuable with this is that it did give me an idea of, hey, maybe you need to do this for like an hour and a half, or this needs to be done 3 hours per week and things like that. And it gives you different ideas of how to split those up. Now, as you continue to go, you start to get better ideas of what works best for you, but this gives you something to start off with. So, as I said, super valuable, and I take the things that they kind of recommend and I start putting in a perfect world, this is what our scheduling could maybe look like. And so I put all of the subjects that, again, in a perfect world, I would be hitting in that full year. How many days per week that I might want to do those, and the time frame that I see those things could happen. Now, I've already done some modifications with this because, as I said, I've done it for long enough. I know that our grammar takes a different amount of time than what this one recommends, and there are different times that those subjects just kind of flip-flop, and I make changes as necessary and what fits for us. Then along this, I put our Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then I start checking things off and thinking about how things could work, what days would be best to do certain things, and how I might want to work those things in. If I wanted to make sure that I hit a weekly poetry tea time, looking at all our schedule, what is really a viable option for that? What would really honestly work when I'm just putting it on paper? Because if I can't get it to work on paper, you can almost guarantee it's not going to work in a real life scenario. And so what I do is I mark all of those down, and then I start to get an idea. And depending on how this works, again, kind of goes back into how I would schedule the whole year. Now, I do not just go in and I schedule it and be like, okay, well, I marked this day, and so that day must be done. No, it just gives me an idea of when we need to start the year. When I ideally, honestly, I usually look at when I want to end that year, and then I look back, I kind of go back, okay, well, if I want to end here, I need to make sure that I've done this throughout the whole year. And that just gives you an idea of how to kind of get things going, because if you don't want to be schooling in June, well, then you have to make some arrangements throughout the rest of your year to make sure that you aren't schooling in June. Otherwise, you may be sitting here in July thinking, why are we still schooling? Because you didn't evaluate those times. So that is just a little idea that you can look into. Additionally, I start putting in little ideas about how I could rotate different subjects, maybe what subject I might want to draw in 2 curriculums with and rotate those. Like, for instance, writing. I feel like writing, we could do IEW and something else, kind of rotating those so that neither one feel cumbersome throughout the year. Same thing with just different other subjects. I just kind of evaluate those. I make myself little notes. And then when it comes time to setting up the new planner, which I don't have in front of me right now, but I do have that right here if you want to see which one it's going to be. When it is time to do that, then all of these things are kind of already dealt out for me. And like I said, throughout the year, I will be adding things in. So as far as like Christmas school, we always do something for that. I have notes in here for that I will go back and I will reference, make changes, make things along the way that we might want to go. This is another great thing. I write down like curriculums that I see throughout the year. No, I don't want to just purchase it right now, but let's think about it. And if I'm still interested in this in so many months, then yeah, maybe let's look into getting that. Or is that something we can move over into the next year? So these are the things that I'm using to kind of pull all of my ideas together in order to hopefully set up a very successful 5th grade. Now, this I feel like is kind of a later planned year than I've done in the past. Things are getting a little bit heavier as we move a little bit further into our educational levels here. And one thing is, if you have 4th and under, just try to relax a little bit, because it does start getting more and more difficult to find time for all of the things. So I do wish maybe I hadn't tried to do so many things right off the bat when we were younger, because now we are having to do all of the extra things to make sure that we are getting up on par with everything that we need to be, in my opinion anyways. Okay, if you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. If you enjoyed this video or you found it helpful, I would love if you consider hitting that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.